And thank you for coming. Thank you also for the time you have already invested and will invest in this very important problem statement. It's always wonderful to hear yourself bigged up in expectations by someone else before you speak, but thank you, Tim, for the kind introduction. As Tim mentioned, for the last 3.5 years, I've been leading the stand-up of the analytics business at Suncor, and really tonight what I'm hoping to do is share some of that experience with you in a way that might be useful, both as you approach this particular challenge, but I think also as you think about your career or potential career in data and analytics and where you are on that journey and maybe where you'd like to end up on that journey. So really just to set a little bit of context for this evening, I'm a big Winston Churchill fan, and he said, "I'm always ready to learn, although I seldom like being taught." So I think I can certainly relate to that, as maybe many of us can, which is we're often willing to change, but we're incredibly sensitive to the context in which those opportunities are presented to us. Context matters a great deal. And, good storytelling always needs context. Our favorite stories never start with the ending. They build color and they build intrigue as they go. Compelling someone to action needs context, right? For those of us with kids or spouses, how often does "because I said so" work, right? Never. It's incredibly important that when we're trying to compel somebody to action, context, again, matters a great deal. I guess really what I want to say is the rationale for what we want to achieve and delivering that in a context that demonstrates we have understood the perspective of those we're trying to convince of doing something is critical. It's of the utmost importance. Many of us are here because we believe in the power of data in terms of how we tell those stories and how we compel people to action. We want to create insights that are inspiring to an audience so that they can't wait to get out and do the thing we're trying to convince them of doing. So the premise for what I want to talk about this evening is that insights are most valuable, they are most compelling when they are delivered in the right context. So hopefully that makes sense. So I think the Datathon is already a great approach because this group of people has come together with an aligned goal. Right? That's an excellent place to start, zeroing methane emissions. What I can tell you, as maybe a slight aside, but in my experience, one of those most important red flags you can teach yourself to listen to is if your spidey senses are telling you that a group of people are coming together either without a common understanding of the problem statement or worse still, potentially conflicting objectives. That could be a topic for another day, but certainly that's a lesson that we've all, on my team, certainly learned the hard way on a couple of occasions. There are lots of models and frameworks out there that explain context. This is my version of hopefully a simple frame that you can use as a tool, as I said, both in the context of coming together on this problem, but also as you think about and progress through your own involvement with data and analytics. Business operations or the organizational context. These are some questions you want to ask yourself. I think they're probably self-explanatory, but is there leadership support for what I'm about to do? Are we well funded? Are we well resourced? Are we 11th on the top 10 priority list? Where are we? Do we have a track record in this space, or are we actually starting out fresh, right? Is this going to be new to a lot of people? Data context is probably something we're all familiar with. Many of us in the room will be used to thinking about data hygiene, and we're thinking about how's my quality, how's my completeness, how old is the data set I'm working with, where did it come from, what's my level of trust in it, has it been manipulated or cleansed? But we also want to broaden the aperture a little bit and think about what is this data actually telling me? How aligned is it with the prevailing view of strategy or the conventional wisdom of the operating context of what I'm trying to solve for? How big a change are we talking about? How is this going to be received? I think the macro environment as well is probably self-explanatory. You're always approaching problems, approaching teams within the societal or regulatory or economic or industry context, certainly very relevant to the problem that you are all about to embark on solving. I think for me, what many models miss is you. What context are you bringing to the problem that you're attempting to solve for? What are you bringing to this team of people that may be forming up for the first time? So really, that's what I'd like to dive into a little bit more this evening. As I get into this model, maybe think about it not just in relation to the problem of solving for methane emissions, but also relating it to where you might be on your journey with data and analytics and where you might want to go eventually on that journey. So maybe just think about the model in terms of the roles or personas or those kind of archetypes that that it may fit into. Obviously, I'm generalizing to a great extent, but hopefully this is just a simple frame to apply some tools to your own situation. If we take discovery, you're really at the start of your journey. You might be seeking understanding. You're looking to evaluate if something is worth your time and effort. And Tim, I think you touched on that earlier in terms of hopefully many of you have maybe crossed through that phase for this particular problem, and you've made the decision that you do want to invest that time and effort. As you move into that explorer phase, you might consider, okay, I've seen the value. I'm committed to learning. You're starting to find your strengths. You're starting to find your gaps. Then moving into really that idea of I'm a practitioner in this space. You have the skills, you're actively applying them to the context of the problem, you're bringing that practitioner lens to the team that you're participating in. The evolution of that then in terms of being a guide is really you're starting to look at, okay, I can lead people, I can coach people in the domain that I operate in. You're starting to orient mixed teams towards new problems that are going to show up against the opportunity. So I'll dive a little deeper into those quadrants. And as I said, this is hopefully where I can start to share some of the things I recommend you think about based on how I've seen this work evolve at Suncor over the last 3+ years. So firstly, know your why, right? Why are you approaching this journey? Why are you wanting to hopefully invest that time in discovery? You know, you have to know your own opportunity context. You have to understand the problem that you're approaching, and you have to know, why am I open to discovering something new in the first place? And you have to be honest with yourself, which is, am I really interested in the topic? Did your boss tell you to? Is it about advancing your career, right? There's a lot of interest in data and analytics because it's viewed as a great career path. Well, you know, I would say again, word to the wise, you have to love it, right? If you force yourself into data and analytics as a career opportunity without loving it, it can be quite short-lived. So that passion has to be there. Keeping an open mind is a really important one as you start on the journey, right? You don't. This isn't about solving problems the way you always have done, right? It's about being open to learning how you can approach problems differently, learning from the skills of others, and it's not necessarily about the lens of the particular domain that you bring with you, right? So that, I think the broader you can have your aperture as you come into this process, the more valuable an experience you'll find it to be. Know the experience you bring. So it's kind of a counterpoint to the last one, which is you're here because you have expertise. You have a lot of value you can offer. The important thing is not to you're not showing up to convince others or educate, and you don't have to know going in how your experience and skill set may be valuable or relevant. You just have to know what it is and be ready to discover how it could be relevant to what you're approaching. And then that last one, I think maybe Tim touched on a flavor of this, but manage feeling overwhelmed, right? It's a daunting space, or it can be, right? We're talking about a very broad field that can feel complex and overwhelming at the beginning. It is a massive, ever expanding domain. I highly encourage you to set realistic expectations for yourself at the start of your journey. So moving on to, all right, you're now in the your Magellan, the front of your ship at the start of your grand adventure. So I think one thing to think about here is how you balance a value focus versus the ability to experiment and the willingness to experiment. One way to frame it would be to value creativity over discipline. Don't let yourself be too constrained at the start of your journey. There's a great article by McKinsey, which Sheldon sent my way, which kind of talks about the importance of balancing the tension between the want to be creative, but also the discipline and rigor of execution and good strategies, how you balance those things. So it's very relevant to that explorer piece of your journey, which is be open to experimentation. Don't stifle innovation, creativity early on. Be willing to take a few chances. Maybe building on a point from before, look to complement your experience. So this is really about, I guess another way to say it would be choose wisely where you spend your time, right? As I said, it's a very large field. There's lots of things that will look interesting and compelling. Try and narrow in, or what are those skills or competencies that are going to enhance or amplify what I know I'm bringing to the table, and think about how to invest that way. The final one, super important one in this context, ask for help. This is the perfect time to do that. You can't and won't know everything, and be comfortable with that going in. I think it's important. It's okay to be a little bit vulnerable, right? That doesn't always feel great, but I think this in particular is a wonderful forum to be a little bit vulnerable and ask questions and learn from peers. It's not always an opportunity we get, so take full advantage of it in the context of this datathon, but also practice it in your careers, right? It does take some bravery to say you don't know, but I think certainly my experience, and I would say the experience of my team, is you get a lot more out of it when you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, a little bit brave, and hold up your hand and ask for help. I would say I can definitely speak for my team, where I don't think I've ever witnessed a bad response to somebody asking to learn more. Right? You will always find people that are generous with their experience and wisdom. Into the practitioner phase. So I think this really is about build your business knowledge where you can, right? The thinking of that idea of compelling insights, like the best professionals I've experienced in data and analytics, the ones that really differentiate themselves, are the ones that really understand the business context, the P&L, the profit and loss context of where they're operating. Usually they distinguish themselves very quickly. So knowing where to apply your expertise effectively is extremely valuable. The downside of that, you can waste a lot of time doing the right work in the wrong place. So that idea of where to match up your expertise and effort to where it will truly make a difference is extremely important, and that comes with knowing the business that you're operating. And as I said, I think a career point, that differentiator, the best practitioners are the ones who get the context of where their work adds value. Similar point, know your gaps. Again, right, we love to think we know a lot, and we love to seek extra knowledge, and we want to be knowledgeable about what we're talking about with peers and with colleagues. Thinking we need to know everything is a fast track to failure, because we can't. Like that is an unrealistic and impossible expectation to put on yourself and also on others, right? We can't hold others to that benchmark within a team. Otherwise, we're essentially setting them up to fail. Collaboration. This is a tough one. It's very easy to say, it's very easy to talk about the key skills that make that possible, but this is by far the hardest thing. And it takes a lot of practice. I am still practicing this. My collaboration with my peer group, there's a ton of work I can do in that space. And honestly, I struggle with it every week. So don't think this is easy, but if you're going to pick a skill set to invest in that will really set you up for success, knowing how to be an effective and compelling collaborator is a really great place to start. Let me break it down a little bit. I think there's the ability to work with multiple disciplines is paramount, right? The best projects I've seen are where you get the right skill mix of people that are bringing different competencies that meld perfectly for the problem statement you're trying to solve for. So get good at working with other disciplines and recognizing the value of those skills. I think if I was to talk about maybe the golden soft skills is, how do you educate simply? How do you communicate clearly? How do you listen very precisely? Those are the golden skills to collaboration. If you get those three things right, you'll reap rewards in terms of how you work with others. I think, and the final thing, and I don't know if there's any Brene Brown fans in the room, but empathy will always help you through. No matter what team you're on, everyone is going through similar things to you are. They may have different domain expertise, but they're just as worried about their gaps in knowledge as you are. If you're dealing with a highly complex problem, it's not simple to some and complex to you. It's complex for everybody. So being able to empathize that pretty much everybody is going to be going through some similar version of what you are will always help you be a more effective collaborator, whether you're in a highly established team or a team that's just forming. Moving on to the Zen master of analytics, your guiding and coaching. Still a lot to learn in this space. And I should say this is a continuous and virtuous cycle, because just when we think we're great guides, we're going to learn a whole bunch of other contexts that we have to rediscover again. Every time you're taking on a new role or a new challenge, you're going to find yourself evaluating this journey again. So what does it mean to be an effective guide and coach and leader in this space? I think, as it says there, leading through ambiguity and uncertainty. You are always going to find that when we're tackling hard problems, tackling new problems. And one thing that's important is absolutely not everybody likes to work this way, right? High change, high uncertainty, high ambiguity environments are typically not where the majority of people like to work. So you have to be conscious of that as you think about the patience and persistence with which you have to approach some of the people relationships, and also, your expectations of yourself in terms of how quickly you'll get to results. I would say leading people through change is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my career, and it takes constant practice, and you'll never get it right twice in a row. So all you can ask for is to build your skill set of how you lead through change. I think really what marks the difference here is your effort profile. As a practitioner, you're 70% doing, and in your guide, you're 70% leading others, and that's where the bulk of your time is going to be focused. Some behaviors that will help you and help your team is keep asking yourself, how can I simplify? How can I add clarity? And I think importantly, and I kind of touched on it before, is it's an overused term, but how can I create psychological safety for people who don't always feel secure in these high ambiguity, high change, high complexity environments? That's your role as a guide, is to create a space where people can learn from one another, express some of that vulnerability I talked about earlier. Skill blending. This is one I've learned a lot about in the last 3 years. is how do you focus on the right mix of skills, experience, styles? This to me is what we mean when we say diversity. This is what it means. Differences of background, differences of experience, differences of skill set. And when you get the right blend of that around a problem statement is where I find the magic really happens. There's no one way answer to some of these complex problems. Keep testing yourself within that blend of diverse skills. Have you got respectful discourse? That's a really great way of testing if you've brought together the right mix of opinions. Is you shouldn't be agreeing with each other all the time, but there should be a healthy discourse, not a discounted of others' skills, opinions, experiences. So keep testing yourself on whether or not you're hearing that at the tables that you sit at. Defend up. I'll explain what this means. So very often you're going to have to defend your approach to problems. You're going to have to defend whether or not the value you think is there is really there. You're going to have to defend your ways of working. You might have to defend your attitude towards risk. Typically, these teams are going to have a higher risk tolerance than some of the organizations they're working with. Many leaders that you interact with will not have got where they are by working this way. So it's important to realize that oftentimes your role of selling up is to someone for whom working this way might be fairly unfamiliar. Structuring teams this way might be unfamiliar. This idea of iteratively working through ambiguity and risk. I can't tell you what the ROI is right now. I don't know yet. Well, it's a very uncomfortable conversation for leaders that haven't grown up this way. So the other thing is, again, very easy to say, very difficult to do, but be bold, be firm, because your team needs you to do that. One thing I've learned is my way, your way, is very rarely the best way. I can't think of anything that hasn't gotten better by me discussing it with my team. And I think it's, again, you need to be fairly humble on how you approach that, but I stand by it in everything I've done over the last 3 years. It's always better when I ask for input from others. I am never right the first time. Don't tell my wife. So I think I want to leave it there. As I said, my aim was to provide you a few mental cues, a little bit of a tool set as you approach this problem, as you approach that, as you approach your careers in this area. And what I would say is just to maybe touch some of those key points. Insights in context are most valuable. Where you are on your journey is probably the most important context to be aware of as you approach a new team, a new problem. And as I say, I hope you maybe get some value, 1 or 2 nuggets out of what I've shared this evening. I wish you the best of luck